Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel today. I'm going to show you all the materials that I use to create an alcohol ink painting slash fluid art painting. These are most of the items that I generally use. I won't obviously include everything because sometimes you go off on a tangent and you use other materials, but these are the rough basics of what I use when I'm doing an alcohol ink painting or just a general fluid painting. So I'm going to start with the paper. Generally with alcohol inks I use Yupo paper, Y-U-P-O. Now it's a synthetic waterproof paper, which basically means when used with watercolour or inks, the paint will dry by evaporation and there'll be no absorption by the paper. Yeah, so this is perfect for ink work and watercolour. I generally buy my pieces large and then cut them down to size. This is just, it works for me. It means that I can get the most use out of the paper and I just cut it to size. Sometimes I do little testers, I cut out a little square of the paper, just a little section like that. If you make a mistake, you can use isopropyl and just wipe most of it off and restart. So yeah, I buy large pieces. These are A2 sized, and I will show you where I buy them. So I buy this from a website called saa.co.uk. This is for the UK. I'm not sure about USA or elsewhere, but generally I'm sure you can find it on Amazon. For 10 loose sheets, A2 size, it's £20, roughly between £20 and £25. Next I'm going to go into the alcohol inks. So I buy from Tim Holtz. So these are the alcohol inks I generally buy. Tim Holtz sells alcohol inks and quite a lot of products around this media. The only product that I don't buy alcohol ink wise from Tim Holtz is white, and that's because I've tried a couple and my favourite is this brand called Jacquard Pinata Blanc, and I've just found that this white is a bit stronger than the Tim Holtz white. Yeah, so these inks, they are the Ranger collection. I buy from a website called stampsforyou.co.uk. You can buy them individually or in packs, which is quite nice sometimes because sometimes you don't want every single colour in the pack, so you might just want to buy individual ones. They're around £4 per bottle, but they do last quite a long time. I dilute them when I'm using them, so I don't need to use them from concentrate, so they last a bit longer in that aspect. Okay, so with the Jacquard Pinata, I generally buy from Jackson's Art Supplies. They have a really big store in London, but you can buy online. So this one is a 14mm. That's half an ounce. Next time I will buy a 4-ounce one, just so that it saves money, but also I use this so much. When it comes to the acrylic inks, I use Liquitex. These are the professional Liquitex ink brand. So you can also get these on Jackson Art Supplies, so if you're already buying from there, you might as well chuck these in and not have to pay postage. But if I am buying them separately, I actually buy them off Amazon because I use Amazon a lot and they are the same price, but I find Amazon easier. I don't use acrylic inks that much at the minute, but occasionally I will use it with an alcohol ink painting or a fluid painting. I really like this brand. They have a good selection of colours. They also are very high pigmented, especially the metallic ones. So I've got a copper one here, and I've got a silver one and a gold one. With the gold, I'll use Gold Leaf, which I'll show you in a minute. But yeah, I like these inks. They've got these little pipette things, so you can drop it on the page quite easily and not have to pour it or put it into cups or things like that. They're really good concentrate. They're 30mm. They will last a long time and they come in packs as well, so you can always get a pack of them and try them out. So as I was saying before, I use this liquid gold leaf instead of using the acrylic gold ink. This one is amazing. I literally wouldn't go to any other product. I will spend ages trying to find this one online because it is so high pigmented. It's got great coverage, it's shiny, it's just beautiful. Whenever you add it to a painting, it's beautiful. So I do struggle finding this sometimes because I think it is such a highly sought after product. So when I do find it, I buy like 3 or 4 at the same time because I just don't want to lose it. So the brand is called the Original Liquid Leaf. That's just the brand name, I think. The great thing about this is that it dries really quickly, but also you can use tiny paintbrushes and use it for detailed sections. You don't have to just pour it on. So the website is saying this 35 ml will cover approximately 2 square meters. So that's quite a fair amount. At the top it's sort of got like a red primer. Generally before you use it, if you just shake it, that will mix it all together. So this one you can get on jacksonsart.com as well, but I found it on a couple of different websites. So Jackson Art Supplies doesn't always have it on their website. I have found it in a couple of different places, but basically I would just suggest to look on Google and type in liquid leaf and the colour that you want, and then hopefully you'll find it on a couple of different websites. But it looks like this, so make sure you look for this one. So onto the acrylic paints. I've tried a lot of acrylic paints, I'm sure most artists have, and my favourites sort of change each year, but I will show you the ones I'm using at the moment. Basically it depends on the kind of painting I'm doing and well, first of all the size, the finish, and whether I'm practicing or not. Okay, so if I am doing a larger painting and I'm practicing or I'm trying to set down a base colour, I will grab one of these buckets from probably Wilkinson's or a decorating home store, and then I will buy some emulsion paint. Now I wouldn't suggest using this in your final sort of piece, especially if it's a small piece. You want good quality paint. But if you're doing either setting down a large base colour for a commission or you are practicing, I think it's absolutely fine to use emulsion paint. I've used quite a lot over the years. And also if you want a colour like white or black that you need a lot of, I think that's fine to buy emulsion paint. When it comes to doing painting that you want to sell or high quality painting, I would go for a couple of different brands. So Liquitex obviously is a great brand, we already know that. Their brand Basics is a cheaper version of some of the paints that they do on their website. So they come in all different sizes. This is the 4 ounce, 118 ml. So on the website, on the Liquitex website, it basically says it's developed for students and artists that need quality at outstanding value. It says it's a heavy body acrylic paint, contains permanent artist pigments, and it dries to a satin finish. So I really like this brand when I'm doing larger paintings. It just means the colour doesn't run out so quickly, but also they are good coverage. I mean, I find the white especially quite good. I wouldn't say it's very heavy body. It's I will show you. So it's sort of like, yeah, I mean it's not super heavy, but it's not fluid. So you can mix this with either, what I'll show you later, some pouring medium to make it more liquidy. I would say it's a medium body paint really. I wouldn't say this is heavy body, it's quite light. Yeah, so those are the Basics Liquitex brand. You can get them in larger sizes as well, so I think it goes up to about 900 ml. You can buy a huge bucket of them. So it's great that you can get them in all different sizes. So I probably would get these off Amazon, but they sell them on their website, Liquitex. They also sell them on Jackson Art Supplies. So the other brand I'd recommend is De La Rowney. They also sell a sort of cheaper set of acrylic paints. This one is called Graduate, so it just means it's for students and it's slightly cheaper. I'm not at the stage where I'm buying really expensive art products at the minute, so these work perfectly for me. This one is System 3 acrylic, and generally they're quite high pigmented, water-based acrylic. I would slightly lean towards the Liquitex when buying paint, but these work well. They are good acrylic paint and I would definitely try them out. So they're a good price. You can get these graduate acrylic paints at around £3–4, which is great when you're on a budget, and I mean it's a decent size. This one is 120 ml, so it's a good enough size. You get a fair amount of paint out of that one. This one's a bit smaller, but yeah, it's a good brand and it's quite cheap, so I would definitely recommend these when coming to an acrylic fluid painting. The thing is as well, when you're doing a fluid painting, is you do generally, or you can lose a lot of paint because you're obviously pouring it on the canvas and there's a lot of leftover paint. Obviously there's ways to measure it so that you don't lose so much, but really to get a good fluid pour you need quite a fair amount of excess coming off, just so that it goes over the sides and everything. So you don't want to spend loads of money on a really expensive acrylic paint when you're doing a fluid pour, in my opinion. So now I'm going to come on to the other mediums, so things like pouring mediums and isopropyl. So generally the paints that I buy aren't high flow, they're about medium / to heavy. You can buy high flow paints, so there's a brand called Golden who do a great brand called High Flow. The only thing is it's quite expensive, so especially for new artists or students, and I've found that I can overuse them and they don't last as long as I would like them to. They are a good brand, definitely I would recommend it if you have the money, but if you're working on a more cheaper method of acrylic fluid paintings, then you would need to buy some kind of thinning agent to make your paint go from medium / heavy flow to high flow. Now there's a couple of different methods, so I wouldn't just use water when it comes to thinning your paints. The reason would be that it would be very hard to find the right flow and also the right opacity at the same time. The paint tends to lose its opacity as you thin it with water, so you want to make sure that the opacity is still strong, it's still a high concentrate of colour, but also it's the right flow in terms of the consistency of the painting. So I've used a couple of different things. One of them is the Liquitex pouring medium. I obviously haven't got much left at the minute. This one is quite good. It's 946 ml. It was around £15 to £20. I would say it would last me either 2 or 3 really large paintings and maybe around 10 small paintings. It's okay for the price that you get it for, saying it's best mixed with their Liquitex soft body acrylic colours, and it says it dries clear, glossy and flexible. I've actually found that this ends up being quite expensive if you're adding it to every single paint when you're doing a fluid pour. So I ended up looking at some forums, looking at different ways and how you can change the consistency to a higher flow, and I came up with Floetrol paint conditioner. A lot of fluid acrylic artists use Floetrol. It's great. I've used it in my last couple of paintings. I'll show you the consistency. Oh, there we go. So it's kind of like, sorry about this dirty cut. It's kind of like a bit like PVA glue in a way. So I do a mixture of this and water. On the back it says 1 part paint and 3 parts Floetrol. So when you measure it out, it's suggesting 1 part paint and 3 parts Floetrol. I do I would say around 3 parts Floetrol and 1 part paint, but then I add water, a little bit of water at the end, just to get it up to the consistency that I want. I like it to look like it's pouring, like, not like milk and not like glue, but somewhere in between. So I guess something like maybe gravy. So not watery, but definitely not Floetrol just on its own. It needs to be a bit more watery than that, in my opinion. So that's the brand that I'm using at the minute. I got this one off glenwooddecorating.supplies.co.uk. I find that I get more for my money than the Liquitex one. This one you get 1 litre. So I just find that it's generally more practical. I find that I get more out of it than the Liquitex one. I prefer the consistency of this one. Okay, so when it comes to the alcohol ink paintings, I use a lot of isopropyl. basically you can find them on Amazon, eBay, any kind of hardware shop probably. So I've got 99.9% isopropyl here. This one is from a company called Hexiel. Obviously it's really dangerous, so don't leave it open and around kids and things like that. So I will keep the window open when I'm using this, or you can wear a mask, or just make sure you are in a high ventilated room when using this. I did used to use the Tim Holtz alcohol blending solution, but this one is 59ml and it was around £8, and literally all it is, as far as I know, is isopropyl. I mean, it's got a couple of different things in it, but generally it does the same thing that this does, and it's around the same price. So I don't use his alcohol blending solution anymore. I do keep the bottle though, because I top it up with this one, and it's quite handy to have a smaller bottle, and also it's got a small nib, which is quite handy when you're doing alcohol ink paintings. You don't really want to pour it. So I keep this just to top it up and use the bottle still. But really, you can just go on Amazon and buy this for a tenner, and it's a lot cheaper than buying these small ones. I also tend to put the isopropyl in a spray bottle. So this is just an old hairspray, keratin spray thing, and I top this one up with isopropyl because I quite like to spray it on the yuppie paper before I start an alcohol ink painting, just so that it starts wet and not dry, and that helps the inks to flow around the paper a bit easier. Make sure you probably put a sign on it. I haven't got a sign on mine, but I keep it in my art drawer because you don't want to be spraying this onto your hair or face. But yeah, so find a spray bottle. You can find the cheap ones in Poundland, things like that, and top it up with the isopropyl, and it's quite an easy way to distribute it on the page without pouring it all over the page. I know in America it's called rubbing alcohol, so it's the same thing. In the UK it's called isopropyl, and I think in America it's called rubbing alcohol. So back to the acrylic fluid paintings. This is the silicone I use. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, silicone creates cells and bubbles in fluid art paintings. I'll show you some examples here. They create really nice effects, and what it is that it's an oil and it separates the paint, so that's why it creates those effects. So when you're doing a pour, you can get cells naturally without silicone, but silicone definitely helps create a lot more cells. So I would suggest putting a little bit of silicone in your paint before you pour it. Now you don't need much. I've made the mistake of adding loads and it just sort of destroys the painting. I'll show you a picture here actually of one that I used a lot in, and you'll see that it did not help with the cells at all. It separated the paint too much. So basically what it is silicone is an oil, and it won't mix with water-based paints. So adding oil or lubricants to your paint will help the layers separate and slide against each other. So that's how cells happen. So this one you can find like in a hardware store, or I got this one on eBay. It's just, I don't know what brand it is, WD-40. So it's a spray bottle. So when you're adding it to your painting, I would probably add it with a dropper because, again, like I said earlier, it doesn't need too much. So if I'm doing a kind of A3, A2 size painting, I will probably only add around 3 drops to each paint colour when I'm mixing it. So when I'm doing a high flow acrylic pour, I quite like to, once it's poured on the canvas, I quite like to use a spray duster to move it around the page. Now I'll use my hands to sort of move the canvas around, but if there's little sections that maybe I haven't quite got the effect that I want yet, it could possibly still be under the paint because there's a lot of paint on the canvas. Especially if you're doing a dirty pour, cup flip or something like that, there's still a lot of paint under the layers that can move around. So I use a spray duster to just move bits of the paint around that I think is either too thick or that I want more effects on. This works great. Then it's better than blowing through a straw, I think, because I can limit this to a really small section, whereas when you're blowing you might sort of blow across a different section on the painting that you don't want touched. So this one's good just because it's got a really small nib there, and you just spray. It's basically just air, and that helps move the paint around. This one is just super cheap. I got it off eBay and it was like £2, but you can generally find them in Poundlands and hardware shops, things like that. I haven't actually used it on any dust yet, so who knows if that works. But yeah, it works with the painting, and just don't press too hard. That's the only thing I would say, because if you've got a fairly thick fluid painting, or if it's started to dry already, you can if you press too hard, it can kind of flip the painting off, and I've had it go all over the wall here and things like that. And I would also use it on the side, alongside the painting, rather than directly on top like that. So yeah, that's the spray duster. That comes in really handy. So finally I'm going to talk about the products that I use to seal or varnish my paintings. With the alcohol inks, I don't always use it because sometimes I will frame the paintings, but generally just to stop fading and things like that. Now with the alcohol ink, I would suggest not to use UV varnishes because sometimes they contain isopropyl and will actually make the alcohol inks react a bit. There's a brand called Krylon Camar Varnish which works well in setting the ink. So it's UV stable, which means it's not broken down by UV exposure. So when sealing my acrylic fluid paintings, I will use Liquitex. I've got two versions here. So this is a matte varnish. It's in a spray bottle, so you can spray that on directly above the canvas. I do like this one, however I do prefer putting on a wet varnish, just because I find the spray bottle a bit harder to get consistency across the whole painting. So the one that I use is the Liquitex Professional Satin Varnish. This one's great. So I really like this Liquitex Satin Varnish. This one's great. It gives a really good, nice natural shine to the painting. It's quite matte but just got a really slight sheen over it. It's not glossy. I don't like a really glossy look on most paintings. So what I do is I actually pour it into like a lunchbox kind of container, and then I use these foam poly brush, soaks in the varnish, and then you can swipe it across the canvas. I do one horizontally and one vertically, and it gives a really good coverage because I feel like when you're using brushes you get the lines across and you can see it when it dries. So foam is great when you're putting varnish on, and these are really cheap. You can just get them from any art store, Hobbycraft, things like that. But the varnish I got from Liquitex, and this one was for 237ml, 8 ounces. It was about £10. Next time I buy some, I'll probably get a bigger bottle. So I think you can get a 946ml for £23, which is great. I mean, this bottle has already done me around 4 large paintings. I've got a little bit left. So yeah, I would really recommend this one. Satin varnish, really, really nice. So sometimes I like to put resin on my fluid pours instead of a varnish or a matte finish. I love using resin. I've got quite a few videos on using resin, so go check them out if you're interested. This one, sorry, looks disgusting, but anyway, I use a brand called Art Resin, high gloss epoxy resin. And this one is the resin, this one is the hardener. Obviously you need both to react. You can go and check out my video on how to mix and apply resin if you're interested in that. But these two have been my favourite brands of resin so far. I've used quite a few different ones. So if you go on their website, it's great. It's really informative. It gives you loads of Q&As. It's got some videos as well. So I find that it's really simple to use and a great brand. Their website is artresin.com. So this one is 1.89 litres of resin and 1.89 litres of hardener, which it says covers approximately 32 square foot, which is, I mean, quite a lot. So for these two in the UK, it's probably around £120, which sounds expensive, but when you're selling art, you can obviously put up the price due to the finish that the client might want, and if they want a high gloss resin finish, then you'll just have to put up the price. I think it's a lovely finish to the painting. You can get smaller bottles if you want to practice. You can get ones that are sort of like this big for about £50, or you can get a really small tester one for about £15. But yeah, if you decide that you like resin, you like using it, I would go for the bigger bottles because you will get the most for your money. So I love working with resin, and I would definitely recommend this brand, so go check them out. So I think that's about it when it comes to the materials I use for my alcohol ink and fluid art paintings. So thank you all for watching this video today. I hope it's helped and given you some insight into the materials used. If you're working on a budget and you want to start this style of art, these are the items that I would recommend. And also it'd be great if people could comment on brands that they use in different countries. I'm aware that this is the UK, so most of these products you should be able to buy online in other countries. However, I'm not 100% sure. There may be some items that you can't get out of the UK. If you haven't subscribed, then please hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching today, and I'll see you all soon. Bye!